Switching gears now to the Supreme Court and the recent ruling that could impact the advancement of Black people for generations to come. The court closed out their term by ending affirmative action, banning colleges and universities from giving extra consideration to Black students in admissions. But while the consideration of race is now banned, a factor that overwhelmingly benefits white students is still allowed.
I started college in 1997. I went to UCLA as a political science major. My class was one of the last classes to enter while Prop 209 was being fought.
Itika Oldwine Grimble was a student at UCLA, a public university, when the state banned race-based affirmative action 25 years ago.
It's clear that I wouldn't be a professor at this school without affirmative action.
Today, she's the founder of Oldvine Florals and Fragrances and remembers the immediate aftermath of the ban.
So once Prop 209 passed, we saw at the campus on site a decline in students of color. You could see it. It was obvious when you're walking down Bruin Walk, when you're inside of your classrooms, it dwindled. And really the only people of color, African Americans specifically, you saw were athletes.
Black and Hispanic populations dropped approximately 40%, while Asian and white populations grew.
It was absolutely my biggest fear. I did not want to go to a, predominantly white institution. I wanted to go to a diverse institution. And part of that diversity came from affirmative action.
Now, the rest of the country is in the same boat. Late last month, the Supreme Court banned race as a consideration in college admissions for both public and private universities.
Regardless of what those justices have put out today, that diversity unites us, not divides us.
Even though most schools aren't even close to achieving their diversity targets. Black people make up approximately 13% of the population, but only 6% of top-tier universities.
They was like, we let y'all play this game long enough, okay? Like, if y'all knew it was finna come to an end, we don't know what to tell y'all. So if y'all don't know somebody right now that could give you a recommendation to get into these schools and stuff like that, we don't know what to tell you, okay?
Choosing not to support affirmative action is choosing not to recognize this country's past.
Diversity brings a lot of uniqueness in terms of thoughts, and it definitely fosters learning here.
One of the justices on board with this ruling, Clarence Thomas.
Clarence Thomas has been on a mission to dismantle every institutional attempt to help and aid not just Black people, but any people who have been disadvantaged in this society since he's gotten on the court.
Who likely wouldn't even be on the Supreme Court without affirmative action.
He, like Samuel Alito, appears to operate from a kind of rage, a sort of cold rage against the entire 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, which they find to be an affront to their own self-image and to their image of America as this country that is noble and that has always been noble.
In his opinion, Thomas called affirmative action rudderless, race-based preferences that fly in the face of our colorblind Constitution. But decades ago, when he was head of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, several news outlets quoted him saying, "God only knows where I would be today if not for equal opportunity measures," adding, "These laws and their proper application are all that stand between the first 17 years of my life and the second 17 years." And when Thomas was accepted to Yale Law School in 1971, the university was reportedly trying to hit a target of 10% Black incoming students.
He believed that people assumed he was there as a beneficiary of affirmative action, and it grated on him.
He came to blame affirmative action for the rejection he felt.
Affirmative action means removing the barriers for qualified students. So it has always been about the student is qualified to get into the institution. They meet all of the requirements. And then race is one of the factors that is considered among other factors.
But despite headlines proclaiming that affirmative action is dead, that's not entirely true.
It's never been about admitting students that are not qualified to any institution. It's simply allowing opportunities for people that have traditionally been disadvantaged.
Only the consideration of race is banned. Plenty of other factors can still be considered, like athletic recruitment status, financial aid qualifications, geographic location, and legacy.
Ignoring the fact that white women are usually the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action, they didn't take any issue with holding spaces for donors or legacy students. Which means that if your already white campuses start to look a whole lot whiter in the fall, you know why.
We're the only country in the world with legacy preferences for students whose parents are alumni, a factor that overwhelmingly benefits white people. At Harvard, legacy kids are 8 times more likely than other applicants to be admitted and are 70% white. At 4 elite schools, Notre Dame, USC, Cornell, and Dartmouth, there are more legacy students than black students.
Legacy admissions, especially in Ivy League institutions, means that someone's mother, father, grandfather, uncle went to this institution, and so they are given preference to attend these institutions. So that is still allowed, and that has always been allowed. So it's a real, just kind of, to me, slap in the face to say that we're not going to consider race, but we will consider your dad, your granddad, your great-granddad attended this institution, and we are admitting you. And many times those admissions, those are, in my opinion, unqualified individuals.
One reason for low black student population, black people were banned from many schools until only recently, including at UNC, one of the plaintiffs in the Supreme Court's affirmative action case. They wouldn't even admit black students until 1955, and then only because federal courts forced them to. Another factor that can still be considered, gender, pointing to one of the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action, white women. Now, many are bracing for other areas that could be impacted by the Supreme Court's affirmative action ruling, from coaching in the NFL to workplace diversity programs to minority scholarship and fellowship programs. And also wondering what else the court will roll back next.
Clarence Thomas actually was quite blunt about what he wants, and here's the quote from him. In future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell.
When we come back, we're bringing this story right here to the studio. How could this ruling affect you, even if you're not a student? And what's next on the Supreme Court's strike list? We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.